All right. So today we have a very, very special guest returning to the Hangar Bar with us. But first, we're going to kick off this, as we do every episode, with a question of the day. So our question of the day is, what is your favorite food or beverage from the Hangar Bar?
Wow.
Scott, you want to start this one?
Yeah, I can get us kicked off because I had to refresh myself. I've never eaten at the Hangar Bar. So again, when we're down there later this year, I'm gonna eat at the Hangar Bar for sure. Try some of the light bites. But Jock's Old Fashioned is my go-to beverage there. I'm just an old fashioned stan. So everywhere I can get an old fashioned, I'll get an old fashioned, and that one there is delicious.
Awesome. Very good.
Fantastic.
And our special guest, Theron Skees, is back with us. Theron, what do you have for us?
I was going to say, and I don't know if they serve it anymore, but the drink that I really love was called the Diving Bell. And the reason I love it is because I have a version of the original Jock Lindsay menu, which was the very first version that we printed before it actually became a menu. And as you guys know, they don't have this anymore. Anyways, that was one of my favorite drinks.
That's amazing.
Very good.
And I think it is still on the menu. I saw it there when I was reading the menu this afternoon.
Oh, fantastic. I brought a few souvenirs just to share whenever you
Awesome.
like.
Awesome. Awesome. And we need to preempt that saying you did not steal them.
No, no, no.
There's no thievery.
No thievery. No. When you're working on a project like this, you often you have to get a lot of samples to approve it, the final kind of look and feel before they go into production. So ultimately, we end up with closets full of this stuff.
That's amazing. Well, I actually have three favorite beverages from the Hangar Bar, and that's probably bending the rules a little bit, but I guess I don't care.
You're the host.
You're the host.
My first one would be the Reggie's Revenge. Anybody that knows me, I am not a snake fan at all. Like, ugh, I can't even see him on TV or pictures or anything. But that drink is delicious, and I love that it's served in like a science beaker sort of situation. The other one would be the Fountain of Youth because it's bright blue and one of the first drinks that I ever had at the Hangar Bar. So there's some nostalgia and close to my heartness with that one. And then the other one is the chocolate cake shot. And we experienced this one when we were there in February with a group of friends. And it's like 3 or 4 different kinds of liquor that are mixed together. And then you suck on a lemon and you take the shot. I don't know how the science works, but it tastes like chocolate cake, and it is
Wow.
amazing.
Very
Yeah.
cool.
So those are my three.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Scott.
I'm Candice.
I'm Lacey.
And I'm Lariah.
Grab a drink and come hang with us at the Hangar Bar.
Welcome back to the Hangar Bar, everyone. We are super excited to have you with us today,
As always.
as always. So we have a little bit of an admission to make. We are actually recording this intro to the episode several days after we actually recorded the episode. And we have good reason for that, don't we?
Very much so.
Today's episode, I think you're going to want to download it. You're going to want to record it. You're going to want to listen to it over and over and over again. We have a special guest with us today.
A returning
Special guest. A few weeks ago, we had a special guest, Theron Skees and James Warda, who were at that point talking about their newly released book, How Does Disney Do That? Theron offered to come back and talk to us in detail about our namesake of our podcast, because if you'll remember, he was the lead Imagineer for the Disney Springs project, including Jock Lindsay's Hangar Bar.
Mm-hmm.
So, with that in mind, we're just going to jump right in. That might be a little bit disconnected. I don't know how the edit's going to sound yet because I've not listened back to that. But we started with our typical question of the day. We tried to take a pause to get into this intro, and the conversation never allowed us to go there. It was that good of a conversation, right?
And when you have that kind of valuable time with a former Imagineer, you don't waste it on doing housekeeping stuff.
Right. You don't waste it on this.
Right.
So Enjoy this episode, folks. I think it is one of our best. I've said that a couple times this season, but this is a fantastic episode, and we hope you enjoy the conversation as much as we enjoyed the conversation.
All right.
You got to
Welcome
like
back.
drinks if you're going to the Hangar Bar.
Right. Yes.
Yes. I mean, the food is just kind of an absorption sort of situation
So
for
you
the
can drink
alcohol.
more.
Yes.
I'm surprised
Please
nobody
drink
said the
responsibly.
cool-headed monkey.
Ooh.
I think I must have looked over that one on the menu.
Ah, well, the cool-headed monkey was originally designed to represent what they actually ate in Indiana Jones' Temple of Doom, which was chilled monkey brains. And we
Okay.
pushed really hard to get chilled monkey brains, which was going to be like a vodka jello, that type of a thing. So it looked like a cast brain. But legal and everybody else wouldn't let us do it. So we called it the cool-headed monkey. And it actually came in this vessel. It was a themed vessel that looked like this sort of African
That's amazing.
hand-sculpted mug. But again, I don't think they have any of those actual mugs. We did quite a few vessels. Did you ever see this one? It's Anything Goes. And you could buy that glass had her dress on it and everything.
Oh, I love that.
And we developed all of those themed vessels that could be bought.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. Another one that we really liked. I'm sorry, I don't mean to take over.
No.
It was called the German Mechanic. And it was, oh, yeah, they didn't do it the way that had, well, you can see it here. It's a German Mechanic. But what we originally had was an oil can. And they came to the table with an oil can. And the German Mechanic drink was inside of it.
Oh, that's amazing. I love that.
Sorry, don't
I-
mean to take over your show.
No, that's why you're here.
Yeah. Like we can just sit back and you can just talk. It's fine. It's fine. So did I see in the description of the German Mechanic that it was a shandy type beer?
I will open it back up. It says, yes, this shandy is best enjoyed with bare knuckles. It's the Bavarian Radler, a.k.a. shandy, with Paulaner Hefeweizen and Simply Lemonade, which if you're in Florida and it gets really hot, you'll love a German shandy.
Yes.
Yes. So the thing that you just said about Simply Lemonade, I have a question for you, and I don't know if you're going to be able to answer it for me, but I have a question for you about that.
Sure.
So we can do that now, or we can wait.
Comme vous voulez, as you will.
Okay. I'll ask you now. So we know that Coca-Cola is one of the main sponsors of beverages in the parks, right?
Yeah.
And if you order a lemonade or a drink that has lemonade in it, it's going to be Minute Maid. But Simply Lemonade is also made by the Coca-Cola Company. And I would like to know why Minute Maid over Simply.
Wow, that's above my pay grade. That's a really good question. I all I can say is, I mean, we being the Imagineering team on the Hangar Bar, we literally spent the entire 4 years of the Disney Springs project on that one part of the project. We did a good 2 years, a year and a half worth of development with the food and beverage team. And what I mean by that is we worked with them on sharing the story, developing the names of the drinks and the food items. And we did all of that so that it could be an accurate representation of the world of Indiana Jones. And the foods team, the beverage team really got into it. So they chose, specific type of alcohol or a specific type of mixing element within the drinks that was representative of that particular drink and what it was embodying. So when they say Simply Lemonade, that is a really great point. I don't know why. Maybe that lemonade had a flavor profile that worked better for the drink than the Minute Maid. I don't know. In fact, I don't even know where the company stands right now on,
On
like
that.
AMC, not AMC, Regal, for example, movie theaters, they used to be all Coke and then they switched to Pepsi. So you go see the movie now and everything on the screen is all Pepsi. So those kind of B2B relationships change and are changing all the time.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, good to know.
I don't know if that was the right answer. It was an answer.
It was an answer. Okay, so I know that we talked about this last time that you were on the show, and thank you so much for being willing to come back and talk more about our namesake, our beloved Hangar Bar.
Absolutely.
We really appreciate it. How did you approach the theming of the bar? I mean, I know we talked last time about, Jock Lindsay and who he was and all of these things, but how did you arrive at that and how it plays into the story of Disney Springs?
Absolutely. It's a great story. And it's not a quick story, but it's a great story. It was at a time in the company when Tom Staggs was the leader of Parks and Experiences for Disney Company worldwide. And what we didn't realize is we, meaning myself and my writer and concept developer and everybody in the early days when we were developing this and pitching it to Tom and Bruce Vaughn and the leadership at inside of Imagineering. It's funny, Bruce was there, Bruce left, went to Airbnb, a bunch of stuff. Now Bruce is back. But in that whole pitching, we really wanted to do something Indiana Jones themed, but we didn't think we had the funding to license it from Lucasfilm, is where we were at. That was, maybe it was a mistake on our part, but we just assumed it's too expensive. We're just, because at that time, Disney Company didn't purchase Lucasfilm and all of those rights. So we were pitching this alternative, made up, fictitious individual who had the gravitas as a Indiana Jones. And I remember sitting in the meeting and Tom Staggs says, well, why don't we just use an Indiana Jones story? And it was this, kind of moment. We can do that. He's the boss. Yeah, we can do that. And all, credit where credit is due. Tom basically said, why don't you do something around Jock Lindsay? And of course, myself and my creative writer and creative director who was with me at that time was Jason Sorrell, pretty famous author and creative executive who's now at Universal Creative. We were nerding out because I'm like, wait a second, this guy knows who Jock Lindsay is? I mean, you just leveled up to like 11 in my mind on the nerd factor. And he said, yeah, because, Jock has such a cool stigma associated with him for having such little screen time. And it would really be fun to play into, that lore. And we were blown away and said, heck to the yes, thumbs up, big toes up, everything was, we were super excited. So we dove into it after that. We had permission, right? So it's like tear everything off the board and get started on an Indiana Jones story. That's how it started.
Okay, great. And so then how does that fit into the story of Disney Springs?
Excellent. Well, when you look at somebody like Jock Lindsay, you knew that he wasn't, even though Jock was in the world of Indiana Jones, Jock wasn't on every single adventure, at least what we saw. So with that sort of permission, the sword of the emperor on each shoulder, we approached Lucasfilm and started to dig deep. We got all of the canon on Jock and where Jock was represented. And he had appeared in, I think, some comic books. And he was on, of course, Raiders for a whole minute and a half, whatever it was. He had appeared in a couple of different places. So in a sense, we had to invent a complete backstory of Jock, a total history and everything, which was amazingly fun. And at the time, this was a blessing in disguise for nerds like us, is Lucasfilm didn't have anybody assigned, if you will, to work on Indiana Jones. So the gentleman that we worked with was the person that Lucasfilm identified to work with us who had the most knowledge, but they weren't making a film. They weren't, there was nothing going on. So they didn't really have anybody assigned to it. So the blessing in disguise was we got to make it up, and make it up we did. We went extremely deep because to be able to choose all the props and to do all the interior design, to to make it feel like a real place that was lived in, you had to have all this backstory to be able to choose from. Every prop, every poster, every single board, everything in there, there's a reason for it to be there. And that's the world of Indiana Jones, right? It's a very real world. It's a very adventurous world. And in some cases, you can say it's hyper realistic, where what do we say? These sort of, hyper realistic things happen. You wouldn't call them supernatural, but you would call them sort of magical. There's lore, there's legend, and this sort of magical things that happen in the world. But it's a very real, gritty world. You get shot, it hurts. You get punched, it hurts. You fall out of airplanes, right? I mean, there's those things that happen in Indy's world. So that was our assumption, building the world of Jock Lindsay. And in literally, I think it was one shot that I think was in maybe a second, maybe 2 seconds, when Jock is on, you guys remember in Raiders when he's fishing and he's on the pontoon of his plane. You see Indy running, dust is flying off him, and he's screaming for Jock, and Jock stands up and he's just caught a fish. There's this emergency, get the plane started. He throws the rod in the water and he turns his back to the camera, and on the back of his denim shirt, we see, you guys know, air pirates, right? Is what's handwritten. Nothing is ever said about it. Nothing is ever done about it. There's nothing ever to reinforce that. So we built an entire history of Jock and how he was in, had Air Pirates Circus and did performances. And so we built this whole thing. So that's the context. Why does Jock Lindsay have a hangar in Disney Springs? We started to look at what other potential destinations first, what's the business that Jock would be in? And that's flying people. And in a sense, he's almost like an adventure guide, more than a transportation service. He's more like an adventure guide is kind of what we put together, right? Only a madman would fly into a country with jovitos, right, that have poisonous darts. And so he's much more than just a drop you off and pick you up later kind of person. The fact that he was there really said a lot. So that was how we began to build that backstory. Well, he probably did some pretty, daredevil stuff in his youth. And because he was an adventure guide, that put him in a category where he could know all of these famous people from history, like Amelia Earhart and like Sir Edmund Hillary. And, so we built sort of a portfolio of who Jock knew and the world and who was in the world, because Indy's in the world. It's not a fantasy world. It's not a parallel universe. It's our world, but there are just these supernatural kind of things that take place, making Indy's world hyper real and a little bit unexpected with lots of lore and legend. So we said, okay, how do we place Jock in Florida, and how does it make sense with his backstory? And is there any potential overlap with adventures? And are some of those overlaps with Indy? Because he's not an Indy exclusive kind of, person, because he didn't show up again in future films. So I know I'm really going off here, and sorry, but I told you it was a big answer. So when you look at the southeastern United States, and then you begin to look at what is around there, I mean, you mentioned the Fountain of Youth as a drink. That was a really important part of legend that we thought certainly Indy or some other adventurer is going to want to look for Ponce de Leon's, Fountain of Youth. So that's a justification for having a base there in Florida. Off the coast of Florida is the Bermuda Triangle. I mean, talk about legend and lore, right? If you look at the Gulf of Mexico, I mean, there are so many wrecks and galleons and gold and pirate treasure. And you look at the Bahamas, and then you move all the way down into the Yucatan Peninsula, Central America, South America. It's Incas and Aztecs and lost temples and lost gold and Machu Picchu. And I mean, you just start even a cursory review of that geographical location was more than enough justification for Jock to have a hub in Florida. And it made perfect sense with this growing town that was connected by water. So Jock's boat could connect him. We fictitiously said it could connect to the Gulf of Mexico, so that got him out that way. But also from a water-based seaplane, he could fly in and out of Lake Buena Vista and land in parts unknown. So from a story perspective, having him there worked perfectly. There was no stretch, and it was just a perfect way to do that. Last thing I'll say, and I promise I'll turn the show back over.
No, this is fine. It's awesome.
All of that story, all of it in mind-crushing detail is in the map behind the bar. Every single adventure, every monetary unit used, every possible thing that you could even imagine, and we went leagues deeper than even what I'm telling you, is all in that map. And we specifically made the map with a bunch of creases and fold marks so that it looked like it just simply got folded up, put in the knapsack, and taken down the road, right? And was added to every single adventure. So anyways, that's the justification for it being there. And it also gave us the ability to kind of broaden Indy's world in a sense to include adventurers of all kinds. And I'll talk more about how that guided us with props and decor and stuff as well.
So, Theron, just a quick follow-up. Sorry, Candice, just a quick follow-up.
No, fine.
How do you start that storytelling process? For some reason, I've worked in corporate America long enough that I'm picturing it's you and three other people sitting around a conference table just spinning a yarn. But how do you get started down that path to create that detailed of a story?
Well, I think the really good news on leveraging an existing character or IP that has quite a lot of equity, a lot of fan support, makes it a lot easier because you can't separate Jock and Indy, right? I mean, Jock sits firmly in Indiana Jones's world. And so then therefore immediately all of the lore associated with Indy now becomes associated with Jock because he's in that world. And so then we started to make some high level story decisions without even really thinking too much about it, okay, well, Jock's a pilot. So now Jock has deep knowledge of aircraft of all different kinds. And so, for example, we then said, well, let's look across the whole Indiana Jones series and comic books. And are there any other adventurers that we knew that were involved in aircraft? Well, Amelia Earhart. She also has a lot of mystery because she disappeared. Mm-hmm. So you just begin to unfold some of those things that are very easy to grab, right? That's low-hanging fruit. That's not hard. And you can very quickly, with just some cursory research, begin to pile on to that story. And next thing you know, you're kind of cooking with gas. You've got enough there that you can really begin to make it work. But you're right; those are many different story sessions where you've got mostly the creative team sitting around, kind of dreaming about that. Lots of sessions with the Lucasfilm team, where we would get to a certain point, and anytime you're in the creative development space, you're always pushing, right? So we're going to pick 2 or 3 things that are really going to push this, which could be fun, but we need somebody to kind of judge, is this too far? Will this hurt the canon, in a case of existing IP? So we would use Lucasfilm that way. Here's what we're thinking, here's, what we're talking, and we would just kind of keep that open running dialogue. And very much like your favorite stack of pancakes, you just keep building that stack until you kind of are thinking it's done, and the syrup starts going on. Sorry, it must be close to dinner time. I'm using food analogies here, but that's how we would do it. And then naturally out of that come a whole bunch of different categories that then give us the ability to build more stories off of the categories. So, for example, aircraft, and then the fact that Jock is now linked to other explorers. Well, that means, okay, well, what type of geographical locations in the world would you explore? So now that gives us, okay, well, if you're undersea, that's a whole thing. You'd have all this accoutrement that's related to undersea activities. Well, what if you're exploring deep jungle places that nobody's ever been? Well, then that gives us the ability to do dugout canoes and handmade spears and weapons, and he's in the air a lot. So this is one part physical hangar where we need a repair shop. So everything in there can repair the plane when it comes in. And maybe Jock had a fleet of planes. And so you know what I'm saying? Once you kind of nail the core of the story, just like a mind map, if you've ever seen one of those, it then breaks out into all these categories that you build on so that it's authentic and real. And anybody sitting in there can look up and say, well, that's one of those old dive suits. Well, of course it is, because Jock ran an adventure guide out of here. And when the crew came in and hired him for Bermuda exploration, he just used the bathysphere right there in the corner, loaded up the scuba gear and fins into the plane, and they were down the road, and when they came back, they hung it up right there when they can use it again.
That's awesome.
Very cool.
That's what we wanted to feel.
So going back to that thing that you just said about authenticity, how important was the historical and thematic accuracy for the design of the Hangar Bar? And what was all the research involved in all of that?
First, it's a really good question, because that's one of the very first things that you have to decide when you're working on a project in a themed environment is this real or is it fantasy? And because that takes the team down two really different paths, and I would say two different kinds of investment levels, right? Sometimes the real can in fact be more expensive than the fantasy. That's not exactly true in Pandora, obviously, because it's based on an IP. But if you were wholly creating something from scratch, you never know. It might be less. So I say that because it's very important context for the Disney Springs property as a whole. In the very beginning, we were faced with the question, is this fantasy or is it a real place? And we made the decision, of course, with the operator, that it's a real place. And Disney Springs is always occurring in the present. It's not a vision of the past. It's not a vision of the future. It has remnants of the past that, almost like an archaeological site, tells us a story of how it arrived to today. And then it, in a sense, because it's an active and living place, in a sense, it's creating those stories that leave the after effect of that story for others to find later. So it's just always in this state of becoming. So that was our design approach, which was massively challenging. And I'll tell you why. Because you had to build buildings like the Hangar Bar that felt like it was built at a certain period of time. So all the architecture, the materials, everything had to be representative of it being built in that time, but it also had to look lovingly restored and overlaid with new technologies that would be found today. And all of those elements had to balance so that it didn't feel hokey, weird, cartoony, unrealistic. It didn't want to feel like an old dusty museum, but at the same time, it didn't want to look like it was, 7-Eleven that uses the brick tiles on the side to simulate brick. Everybody, even non-builders or non-architects, know there's no way that that's a brick building. It's just somebody lick and stick, tiles on there to look that way. That's what we wanted to avoid at Disney Springs. Everything had to feel real. All the materials had to be real. And we got very, very detailed with that. In fact, the Hangar Bar, I believe, is all cypress, that wood, because that was the wood that you find primarily in the day in Florida, and was actually the buildings that are in the Springs. There's only like three or four of them in there. All that wood is cypress. When you go over to town center, all that wood is cedar. Again, very few people are actually going to know that, but that's what Disney does. Is the people that do know that are blown away by the accuracy of the detail. The people who are just swimmers, they're not divers, experience context. Waders, swimmers, and divers. Those are the three categories of experience of people and how they experience. Waders aren't going to care. They're going to read it as wood. Swimmers might say, wow, that's a beautiful type of wood. It's real wood. A diver would say, that's cedar, and these are not box beams with steel in the middle. These are solid wood beams, which is exactly the way the buildings would have been built. So we had to design and build and represent these for all three categories of experience guests and have meaning that's delivered behind each one of those categories of guests.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And that's actually a really good concept to work through. Like if you're building something or designing something to go into, it's got to be right for everybody, right? Like, and hit everybody's interest level.
Right. I'll give you another perfect example. One thing that always drove me nuts as an Imagineer is being in one of the venues, right? One of the Disney venues, or really any themed venue. And you're just with your family, you're there on a business trip, whatever, you're there. And you see somebody over next to a column or something and they're knocking on it. Gee whiz, Mildred, this is hollow, and what I hate about that is that immediately rips that individual out of the experience, and their disbelief is no longer suspended. They're no longer in Cairo or ancient Rome or whatever the column is, right? They realize it's artificial, it's fake, it's fiberglass, it's foam, it's something like that. So because of that disdain, and because they made me the creative executive over this, that's what I wanted to avoid. I wanted everything that guests could touch within their range. When they touched it, I wanted them to have the experience that it was real. And that takes a serious amount of investment on the design team perspective, but it also is a serious commitment from the asset owner. I'm using general terms now, Disney, because for the entire life of that asset, Disney Springs, they have to now maintain those real materials in a very different way than you would maintain a synthetic material. And you can see that in the Hangar Bar, right? It's aged, it's darker than it used to be. It probably needs a little bit of love. A lot of those wooden surfaces all throughout Disney Springs probably need a little love just because it's real wood. And that was the price of investing in something real. If you go to Pandora and that gigantic flower, that organic structure right at the entrance that has all this really cool stuff coming out of it, audio, and I think it has water coming out. If you were to walk up to the side and knock on it, it might sound like fiberglass. It probably is. I don't know for sure. But because none of us have been on Pandora, we have no idea what that flower is supposed to sound like. So it's not going to be weird to us. You see what I mean? So in a fantasy, you can get away with some things. The level of detail is insane, and it's so cool, and it matches up with what we saw CGI with the film. But translating it into actual 3D physical space, you have a little bit more freedom. Sorry, that was
Absolutely.
a deep rabbit hole, Candice.
No, that's... I'll take all I can get, honestly.
Well, sorry, that all Imagineers, former and or otherwise, have lots of rabbit holes. So I'll try to stay focused.
We are here for it. So were some of the biggest challenges that you faced while designing the Hangar Bar, and how did you overcome them? And I think you've touched on some of them with like the attention to detail and making sure everything looked authentic, but maybe some of the more logistical points of that.
Absolutely. I think probably one of the biggest challenges right off the bat was making the Hangar Bar look like a hangar. If you think about Jock Lindsay's plane, right, and physically getting it inside that space probably wouldn't work, right? So when you look at the actual program, right, so the client will come to you and say, we have this amount of investment, and that amount of investment and the money that we want to make from it, the return on that investment, that tells us we need a dining room that's this big with this many tables. And therefore, to produce the drink, the food, the blah, 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 we need a kitchen that's this big. Just to give you a basic example, that happens all over the world all the time. And that's a constantly shifting, pushing. How do you do that? How do you make that work? And it was the same with the Hangar Bar. We didn't have the level of investment in the project to build a hangar-sized hangar. We had to really fake it. And so part of the way that we did that was to give it the basic shape of a hangar. In fact, the ceiling that's in the Hangar Bar is called a lamella ceiling. It's not a real lamella. It's not physically supporting it. But as far as I know, it's one of the only structures, I believe, if somebody knows different, please write me, in the southeastern United States, that's an actual lamella structure. They were invented for hangars, and the way that the beams of wood cross over and everything, it's meant to hold up that shape of a Quonset hut sort of shape. So fun fact for there. So what we tried to do was thinking of the storyline as to when the hangar actually existed, when Jock was alive, when he and his crew were using it, to as an adventure service, right? That he hired it out. That was far enough back in time that when Jock passed away, and the crew that remained basically said those adventure teams would come, and there was a point of time where they basically said, people just hang out and have a beer and talk about the good old days. Let's just convert this to a bar and preserve it while it still exists. And that time, we in our own mind said that the building would have had to have been modified to add a kitchen, to do these kind of things. And maybe it justifies the shape of the structure, and that people will suspend their disbelief enough to think that it actually housed a plane. So that was one big challenge, was how do we make that work? Another challenge was on that particular site at Disney Springs, I'm actually forgetting what was there originally. Something was there originally. You guys may have remembered. It had to be demoed. And then we were building out over the water. So just building out over the water is inherently more expensive and more challenging. But in one of the cypress trees that was around the area that had to be cut down, there was a green heron nest. And inside of the green heron nest was an egg. And they are a protected species. And that actually, when that was discovered, which was pretty early in the process, we halted all construction and had to wait. Now, I can't remember the amount of time. Somebody should write in and tell you if they remember. I think it was 3 weeks that we actually, as a project team, had to wait. And of course, everybody's like, you never have 3 weeks built into any program of any kind that you can just give up. But that was one of those weird natural setbacks that had to be taken into account.
That's interesting. And just so you know, to bolster your ego a little bit, my disbelief is completely suspended. I never put 2 and 2 that a plane wouldn't fit in the Hangar Bar. I just assumed it would.
Yes. Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. I'm so happy to hear that. Because we went, when you're an Imagineer, when you're a storyteller and you're working with a client like Disney, again, I'll couch it like that because it's an important way to think about it. There's a high level of expectation on storytelling. And to go with that, there's a high level of investment to achieve that. So as a storyteller, you spend a lot of time thinking that through. Jock's plane didn't have foldable wings, right? If it did, we're golden, because of course it fit in there. And for the longest time, this will go into Candice's original question, we really wanted to fabricate that plane and put, I'm forgetting the name of the plane now, which is terrible. It's been quite a few, almost 10 years, I think. Well, we were going to fabricate Jock's plane and have it float just outside in the lake. And it was literally just going to be a prop. It was going to be lit up. And we did a deep, deep dive on fabrication costs and blah, 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 blah. We ultimately decided that we would have to pull so much out of the budget for the Hangar Bar to get that built, and from other places, that we didn't want to sacrifice the quality, and we didn't want to give that up. So we actually gave up the plans for the plane. At the end of the day, I'm really happy we did, because if you were standing there or sitting on the balcony, right, which became this porch, this deck, and you were looking at the Hangar Bar and the plane sitting there, it would have been much more obvious that, that would have never fit in there. So.
Which is why it's parked outside.
That's right. But we had, I mean, we had everything. We had that because if you probably know this, being fans, that in Lost River Delta in Tokyo Disneyland, Jock's plane was built fully dimensional and is sitting there in the Lost River Delta. So we had the drawings for it. We had all of that, and we were just going to fabricate it. But so many concerns, right? Birds would be all over it, which would mean it would be covered in guano, and and what if there's a hurricane and it has to be strapped down and blah 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 blah. It before long you talk yourself out of it because it was so many zeros to build it. It's not safe to maintain. You'd have to be on a barge. You'd have to have clip-in point. Before long, it just gets ridiculous. So you're like, yeah, not worth it. Not worth it.
All right. So what is your favorite detail or feature in the bar that guests might not notice right away?
Oh my gosh. I wish we had another hour.
Well, we can make that happen.
There are I think the thing that I like the most, I had the most fun personally, I think the team did as well, is taking those big categories that we talked about, those big story moments in the life of Jock Lindsay, and how those story moments intersected with so many different well-known famous people. And you think about all of the things that you can extract out of that from a storytelling perspective. You then have the very hard job of deciding what elements are priorities to be told, right? Because immediately you could come up with a list of probably 5,000 things or 10,000 things that you could represent in there, banners and props and trophies, and the list is infinite. So you have to go through there and you have to prioritize, what do I show? And this is a really big thing. This is what I teach a lot of students, and that is what we call visual hierarchy. Because in a place like Jock Lindsay's Hangar Bar, or in, for example, the library in Tower of Terror, there is an overwhelming amount of storytelling through dimensional items. And that can be overwhelming, or that can be really stimulating. And it could drive you to want to come back over and over and over. I got to sit in the bathysphere. I have to sit in the map room. I want to sit at the bar. I want to sit over here in the fuselage. So now you've got these moments that take place. I want to sit in Reggie, the boat. You have all these different moments that we were able to create, I think, with great success, that drive people's desire to return. Not just because there's a bunch of junk hanging on the walls, but because there are very specific story moments and story zones within the Hangar Bar that deliver a different category of experience each time you sit in those zones. So that's a long way to answer your question, Candice, but that's my favorite thing, is that there are some of those stories are represented in a dimensional prop. Some of them are captured in sort of a wall hanging or a poster or a map. Some of them might even be the titles on the books that are on the shelf, because none of that is random. I promise you, every single item was 100% thought about before it was put in there. And we had to get the amount of props that you have in there now, you had twice that much to kind of filter through to choose what you wanted.
Yep, I have no doubt about that. The way we know about Disney, there's no coincidence, and everything matters. Everything means something.
Everything means something. I have to say, one of my, and I'll just finish your my answer to your question in this way, is that Imagineers are always looking for ways to subtly honor the team that works on the particular project or scene or something like that. And in most cases, it's very subtle. We never want to be the cause for pulling somebody out of the story, right? And even in my own practice today, I take those learnings into what I do for clients all over the world. And in fact, we don't really do that much anywhere else. But at Disney, that was something that was supported. It was, really, they liked that. So what was really fun at Jock Lindsay's is we did an entire day photo shoot once the Hangar Bar had gotten to a place where they were literally doing training, right? Ops was in there training, the bartenders were training, the culinary team was training, the serving team was training. And we bought a day where we could be in there, and we worked with the costuming team through entertainment and also through costuming. And we borrowed and rented a ton of costumes that were from the period of time when Jock would have opened the Hangar Bar. And prior to that, obviously, we designed and staged the entire day, who was going to be in what costume and why. And we set up this amazing photo shoot and was able to capture pretty much, I think, the whole entire team who worked on the Hangar Bar in various costumes and in various ways. And we used that all throughout. That was super cool and really, really fun.
It's amazing.
Awesome.
Yeah, you have to look for those pictures.
Yeah,
We
definitely.
definitely will.
Yeah. So Theron, how did you go about sourcing those props? Like you paid so much attention to all that detail. How did you go about, did you build them all? Did you find some of them? How did that work?
Great question. Well, first of all, had an amazing prop master. And what was really amazing about our props team is that the gentleman that worked on this was, I would say, I wouldn't say new, but he was new in his career. It wasn't like a 20-year veteran. And I love that because he brought so much passion to the role and worked so well with all of the other members of the team to create that. So in props anywhere in any themed venue, some of those are going to be found items, sourced. Almost all of those found sourced items, antique stores, etc., will be touched up and reinforced and clear coated, and nothing really is bought off of a shelf and installed. It has to be reinforced. A lot of props are fabricated, built, and there has to be extreme attention to detail because it needs to look like it came from the particular period of time. So it has to be built that way out of the right materials, or it has to be representative of whatever it is, a compass right off of a ship or something like that. That has to be fabricated. Now, fabricated props are not always dimensional props. I don't know if you have any pictures of the interior of the Hangar Bar, but there's a lot of banners that are in there. And those are, if you were to ever look at those banners, you would be blown away at the detail. I mean, very specific threads were used. Very, very specific fabric and material were used that were emotive of the time period. These were the Air Pirates banners, and that were what you would see at an air circus, right? If you went to back in the day, right, you didn't just do an air show; it was a circus. The whole thing, people walking on wings and acrobats, and flying with smoke and everything, and that's what Jock Lindsay was a part of. So those banners were designed by the graphics team and were fabricated by some very, very special fabrication teams, but they were actually installed and they look like props even though they were graphics. Same with the map. So that was kind of what happened. In our props team would find elements in the various areas that you'd need them, right? So we have a whole tool area where Jock would have, and the team would have repaired the planes. A lot of those tools were found. They were antiques and they were sourced on eBay and bought from other countries and sourced from people's garages. And they're very, very, very good at finding these things all over the world and flown in and everything like that. One other thing that I would say that I don't think a lot of people know, but it was something that I instituted with the team here because I had done it in France when the team and I did Tower of Terror there and the libraries. They were so prop intensive, and same with Jocks. We didn't have the time to be given a blank slate and then go around and go, yeah, try that there and turn it. We knew we would not have that time. We had to move in and hang everything and get out because props is like the very last thing that you do and you never have enough time. So one of the things that we instituted in France, I brought here, and it was really successful. We literally found a space on Disney property. It was above an attraction, I think, at Epcot, and that was like a VIP space that was closed. It wasn't used anymore. So we built a scaled representation of the interior of the Hangar Bar there, It wasn't in great detail. It was just plywood, right? It didn't need to be plywood. It was all painted a single color. But we used the interior design and we hung shelves and we simulated, if there was like a bookcase or if there's something dimensional that held books, we built all that there. And then we pre-staged all of the props there. And we could spend as much time as we needed. That red book, there's too many red books there, too many green books there, and let's mix this up. And I don't like the way that's hanging too high. And we could figure all of that out there. Once we locked it in, each elevation was tagged, meticulously photographed, and then meticulously packed so that the props teams could come in and literally stage the boxes, hang everything on the wall, and move around the space. And then from an art direction standpoint, the art directors, myself, and the creative director who was over the space would go in and then we would buy that off and have minor tweaks. So I throw that out because I don't think a lot of people know that, but that was one way that enabled us to meet the schedule. So that kept the project delivery team very happy, and it kept operations super happy because they were able to move in on time, kept creative super happy because we could get the look and the feel that we needed to.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I know we don't have very much time left. So first of all, I want to thank you so much for your time again today. This has been amazing. We love having you here. But let's go ahead and wrap up with some of your show and tell and show us some of the things that you have, some of your treasures.
Very cool. I will definitely do that. Can I leave you one last thing? One last
Absolutely.
detail. I promise I'll leave. I only have a couple of things for show and tell. But one last thing is, and I don't know that people would notice this, because Jock was an aviator and flew so many different planes, we literally went through all of the films and the comic books, and we meticulously sourced every single aircraft that was ever represented in the Indiana Jones canology. And we represented that aircraft in the Hangar Bar some way. So, and I'm really testing my memory here. So of course you've got Jock's plane, apologies. I think it's called a Waco, W-A-C-O, Waco DB9 or something like that. So the motor outside on the building is literally that motor. We purchased it and rebuilt it and everything. And you've got some of that represented inside, and tools and cylinders and all that from there was from there. The fuselage that's inside was a fuselage from, I forget exactly what film it was, but it's representative of that. It was an American kind of bomber plane. I think that actually came from one of the comic books. So, but that represents that plane identically. And then the last plane is your sign that you have in your photo that's out front that says the Hangar Bar. That was from Lao Che's plane in Temple of Doom, where the plane crash, remember, and Indiana Jones jumps out in the life raft. So we matched that wing to that. So I think your fans of your show or fans of the bar would really appreciate that we represented every single aircraft that we could find in the Indiana Jones series and tried to represent them there.
That's awesome. And I did just Google the plane type that Jock flew, and it is the Waco UBF-2C plane. So you remembered correctly. Yeah.
I was close. I was really close.
Way to go. Way to go.
So one of the first things that I have to share, I've kind of already shown you, but it's the Jock Lindsay's menu when it opened. And if you can look at this and see, it's a linen covered book that's bound. The actual title here is, it's a pilot's logbook, and that is embossed. And of course, the logo that was developed for the Hangar Bar, that is embossed and printed. So very, very high quality linen covered menu. And then inside the book itself, we designed it in a way that the food and beverage team would be able to slide out the specials that were here and could print and redo those frequently. And that the rest of the menu that would stay for a very long time would be in place, right? And the whole idea is it was meant to be a logbook. So that's why it looks like all of these details are represented, tons of hidden things in here. In fact, Jeff Jeff was the creative director on my team who oversaw the Hangar Bar. So there was a note here, which I thought was really cool. Check out what I found in the old hangar office. Looks like Jock's been around the block a few times. Bet our customers would get a kick out of it, is what this says. So then as you turn through the pages, the idea is that it's Jock's logbook. And one of the stories that we told about Jock was that when Jock flew Indy to all these various locations, while Indy was out, dodging arrows and outrunning boulders, Jock was sitting in a local bar. And that, in fact, is where all of the coasters came from, is all of the different bars or lounges that he went to all over the world. Some of them were made up, some of them are from the lore. And he just made a collection of them, and that's what they use. Hopefully they still use them. Haven't been there in a while. But you can see like matchbook covers, and it's a logbook, but then inserted in is all of these different drinks. And we thought, well, maybe Jock had kind of a bit of an artistic flair, so he could sketch things, and that's where all of the drinks came from, was just things that he saw and sketched. This was really cool. It looked like bamboo with an ornamental base, and then the stir stick was a blow dart that went in. That was
All of that.
that was a real drink. They served that for a while. You could buy the mug. And then you have, maps, and this, of course, is Machu Picchu, all of these different types of things. So we had a blast putting this together, and this was an incredible collaboration with the food and beverage team because, like I said, every drink, every menu item, everything in here was designed with them, for them, and every menu item, every ingredient. I mean, every ingredient we worked with them on. So we had such a fun time. The graphic design is insanely done. This was by Rick and his team at Imagineering. Rick's still at Imagineering, which is pretty cool. So you have all these references of different pilots and things. And then on the back is the actual food menu. And we did this so that it could be removed and replaced very, very easily, where the drink portion was kind of the original idea. This was quite a while ago, so obviously operations changes. But the drinks were going to be offered for the long term, and then specials front and back of that. So that's what I had to share with you. But the other thing I have to share with you is the patch from the back of the leather jacket. This was made so happy that it turned out this way. But we designed the logo and worked with a brilliant costuming team there. And for the longest time, I have no idea if it's still in use, but the leather jacket at Jock Lindsay's was the most expensive item of costuming in the Walt Disney World. I think it was Disney Everywhere. It was the most expensive piece. It was like $700. So if the cast members kept it, lost it, whatever, it was, as I understand it, it was coming out of their check. So this was on the jacket, and it was like this really cool sheepskin lined leather jacket. Was so happy to be a part of that. The other thing, this wasn't Jock's, but I just thought it would be fun to show you what, as Imagineers, we get to do sometimes. One of the backstories Disney Springs was the Springs Bottling Company, which is now Morimoto, right? That was a building that actually pumped spring water out of the natural spring, bottled it, and then sold it as medicinal. It was very good for you. This was 100% accurate with 1900s US. It was something that happened. So the Morimoto team, we pitched them this idea early days. They said, that's great. We love that. So we made a deal to find a manufacturer, and we designed glass bottles. So this bottle is one. I probably should have showed you that. I had the blank that came from the bottle manufacturer that we bought off on. That was made of resin. But we designed it. I don't know if you can see on the bottom here, but we designed it, and all of these. The way that this bottle is designed was the way that it was designed before, but it typically has markings on it, a date when it was made, and then the markings are, I think, related to the manufacturer. Well, we snuck in there WDI, which is, of course, Walt Disney Imagineering.
Of course.
And put all that together. I don't know if you can see the details here, but it's Springs Bottling Company, a date in Florida, and we designed everything here on the bottle. And then, of course, in there we did this giant chandelier, which looked like a manufacturing arm where all the bottles would run through and get filled, and that chandelier is made from the bottles. If you want, you can go have a drink at the Hangar Bar and then go have dinner at Morimoto and check out all the bottles there.
Yeah.
We've done that.
We've been in Morimoto, and I noticed all the bottles, but now connecting those two things is it's blowing my mind.
Yep.
we actually they don't do it anymore. I don't think. I think because they ran out of it. The project team purchased an amount of these. There was a minimum order that was required. It was more than we were going to use in Morimoto's, and then to financially justify the expense, I called a friend of mine in retail and I said, hey, if we do this, we're going to have a surplus of bottles. Would you be interested in selling them right there at Disney Springs? There's that really cool, what is it called? The co-op with all these really cool handmade things. And Disney was really doing some very cool stuff with retail. And he said, yeah, sure. This gentleman since retired, but he said, yeah, sure. How many do you have? So they were selling these at Disney Springs. You could literally buy this and take it home. I mean, it's really a piece of history because you can't get them anymore. Anyways, super fun lore and legend.
That's amazing. That's
That's
amazing.
awesome.
Okay, so I know
awesome.
Candice is wanting to wrap up because I know we're right at time, but I have one more
Sure.
question about food and beverage. So you mentioned working closely with food and beverage. Do you give them the story and then let chefs and bartenders create, or do you go in with an idea of, hey, we want a drink called Reggie's Revenge, or we want a drink called this, and then let them figure out what ingredients go into it? Just 2 or 3 minutes on kind of how that relationship with food and beverage works.
Sure. I would categorize it even broader in a sense. I would say that relationship with an operations team I would categorize it as yes and. That's their specialty. They're going to serve it. They're going to, make it. So they've got to understand cost to benefit ratio, they've got to understand all their margins of their business. So I would never, and Imagineering wouldn't want to go in and force something, because then it's less likely that they're going to keep it on the menu for any amount of time. So yes, we went in with ideas. Wouldn't it be fun if? What if? How about? Wouldn't it be cool? And they really appreciated that because we were the ones that had sat for months in the legend and in the lore, and the longer that we talked that through with the Lucasfilm team, they weren't just, sitting there with the rubber stamp, yeah, you can do that. They got into it, and what if you, and how can we do this? And so that's the cool thing about a vision, an experience vision. Anytime you're creating a themed kind of immersive experience, there's a vision that goes along with that, and that vision is infectious. People love it. They get excited, and that's when you get the best work out of the entire team. And it doesn't matter if you're an Imagineer, if you're a Disney operator, if you're a frontline cast member, if you're in food and bev, if you're in, retail, it doesn't matter whatever the project is. If those individuals on the team catch the vision, all of a sudden, you get this really great back and forth happening. And that's what happened with Jock Lindsay. Jock Lindsay's Hangar Bar is the foods team got excited. In fact, I remember talking with the food and beverage team, and we presented the story, and a couple of the drinks like Reggie's Revenge, we had the idea, Imagineering had the idea. We came in and we said, what if we did this, and wouldn't it be cool? And then they came back with a whole bunch of ideas. Like, for example, they wanted to do a sour drink with pisco. And I hadn't even thought about that. I love a whiskey sour, for example, is a drink that I enjoy. And they were doing a take on a whiskey sour. And they said, look, since this drink represents South America, pisco is, the kind of alcohol that they would use to mix in there. So the beverage team had an amazingly fun time thinking about ingredients and how they would capture it and how they would tell the story through the creation of those products, which is always amazing to see. That's why I'm sad that the menu doesn't exist anymore. And some of the performance that we opened with at the Hangar Bar, that's what set the Hangar Bar apart from any other lounge experience in the world, is we had a performance. Every single drink had some kind of performance that went with it. Something, an audio cue, a response from the server, a response from the whole server team, a gong gets rung. There was so many different things that took place, and that was what it was supposed to be, is not just a bar, not just a lounge, but an entire show that took place. I'm sad to see that went away.
Yeah, I get that completely. And sometimes those operations folks, they're like, oh, it takes us an extra 3 minutes when we have to ring that gong. That's an expensive
Yeah.
thing. That's,
I'm
I can say that because I'm an operations guy, Theron.
Yeah.
So I'm the one that's usually putting the kibosh on those
I
things.
know, it's true. It's
See
true.
how you are. See how you are. Stop stifling creativity.
Well, here's the thing, right? As a creative, I respect that, right? This is design. This is a business. It's a commercial venture. It's not, let's drop this price tag and just end up with a really cool art piece. It has to function. So I totally understand that. But one of the things that I had suggested to Disney, this was about a year after it was open, was instead of operating it yourself, why not get the best bar operator in the world to come in and operate the bar for you? Then you share in the profits, or you share in the rent, or however you want to split it up. Then they can do what they do the best, and you can do what you do the best, right? There's no other Indiana Jones property in the world that exists, not alone a bar, but any physical property licensed anywhere in the world to Indiana Jones. And you've got multiple millions of people visiting Disney Springs every single year. There's not an operator that exists anywhere in the world representing any segment of the economy anywhere in the world that wouldn't kill to be in that situation. So you'd have people clamoring over each other to operate that bar, and they may operate it at a bit of a loss to have the opportunity to do that. Unfortunately, to the best of my knowledge, when I was at Disney, they did not decide to do that. No harm, no foul. I'm not an operator. They've got to figure their own life out. But that would be what I would say would be the best representation of the brand. It would represent the IP the very best. It would give the absolute best guest experience. And it would actually put the Hangar Bar even more on the map than it is today, probably. Not to finish with a negative, but...
No.
No, I think that's amazing. I think that's amazing. Okay, Candice.
Yes.
I'm
Okay.
gonna stop asking questions now.
Well, I mean, I think I speak for both Scott and I, where we could just continue this conversation for hours and hours and hours and hours. And so we would like to speak with you about coming back again, potentially. But thank you so much for joining us and agreeing to come back on the show. We really appreciate it. And we love the information about our beloved Hangar Bar.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. I really enjoy the opportunity to hone in on one, particular project, one effort, and really try to do my best to celebrate the team that worked on it, people that, gave their sweat and their tears and their fair amount of blood in really building something that everybody was very, very proud of and still is. So I appreciate the opportunity to do that, and very thankful to have been around to lead the project and have that be a part of my experience. It was amazing. Taught me so much.
Okay. Well, with that, we will go ahead and wrap up this episode of Hangin' at the Hangar Bar. Our listeners can find us on their favorite podcast platform, as well as Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, YouTube, audio only, although that may be changing slightly. A little spoiler there. And Theron, thank you again so much for being here. We will connect and try and get together when we are in Orlando in December.
Sounds great. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you. And remember, everybody, there's always a great, big, beautiful tomorrow.
And we'll see you real soon.